program. Welcome all to the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center Sunday morning program. Please note that this program is being recorded. This will be made available on the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center website. Throughout the program, we invite all participants to turn on their cameras to create a friendly and welcoming atmosphere and to encourage conversation during the Q&A and discussion portion. If you look to the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to find the video icon in order to turn on your video. Of course, you'll be muted until the discussion portion so that we can hear the beautiful presentation today. I wanted to take a moment to thank the Sunday morning program team for putting these together. We will begin with our devotional program, followed by today's presentation.
Son of man, for everything there is a sign, there is a sign. Oh, Son of man, for everything there is a sign, there is a sign. The sign of your love is fortitude. The sign of your love is fortitude. Under my decree, under my decree, under my decree. And patience, and patience. Under my trust, 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 under my trust. Oh, Son of man, for everything there is a sign.
It was autumn. The year was 1911, and the city was Bristol. While visiting England, Abdu'l-Baha accepted an invitation from Wesley Tudor Pole and his wife to visit them at their home in Bristol, known as the Clifton Guest House. Having set out from London's Paddington Station in the morning, Abdu'l-Baha had arrived at Bristol Temple Mead around midday. Every detail of Abdu'l-Baha's comfort had been lovingly considered, as it was known that he needed some well-earned rest after his time in London. The room prepared for Abdu'l-Baha was filled with white lilies. After the partaking of coffee on his arrival, Abdu'l-Baha walked joyously on the broad paved terrace in front of the house, accompanied by his interpreter and a few of the ladies. He was quite taken with the spectacular sea views from the guest house and the fresh air. After a short rest, Judah Paul laid out carriages to take his guests to see the local beauty spots. The believers were impressed by Abdu'l-Baha's freshness and the spontaneous interest and delight which he took in all he saw. He expressed much interest in rural England, marvelling at the century-old trees and vivid green of the woods and downs. Observing a young woman who rode by on a horseback, with her hair flying free, and several more riding bicycles on their own, he said, "This is the age of women. She should have the same education as her brother and enjoy the same privilege, for all souls are equal before God." In this age of spiritual awakening, the world has entered upon the path of progress into the arena of development where the power of the spirit surpasses that of the body. Soon the spirit will have dominion over the world of humanity.
Chief Intambo himself has been active.
My faith really has helped me to be a chief. As a chief, I've got absolute powers, but I've told people no, any decision that has to be made must be consulted upon with elders. It has taught me to respect the position of our women in the society, to appreciate the education of our children, especially girls in particular. I try to bring in women to become heads of certain communities. Traditionally, women are trodden upon. They're not supposed to be leaders in any community. So I taught them, look, you cannot leave them behind. If you want to advance, let everybody move forward. I am happy to report that this position has been accepted by our community.
What inspiring devotions, and so appropriate to our discussion today. I wanted to thank everyone again for joining us for today's program for the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center. This month we have been honoring the centenary of the ascension of Abdu'l-Baha and focusing on the women who have been most consequential in his life. These three women, Nawab or Asiya Khanum, the wife of Baha'u'llah, Baharieh Rouhani, or the greatest holy leaf, the daughter of Baha'u'llah, and Munira Khanum, the wife of Abdu'l-Baha, are being presented to you by our dear Baha'i sister, Mrs. Baharieh Rouhani. For videos of her past presentations, you can find them on the Nova Baha'i Center website at the bottom where it says Sunday morning program recordings. I would love to join you in welcoming Mrs. Baharieh Rouhani, who has today's floor to present to us about Munira Khanum, the wife of Abdu'l-Baha. Welcome, Mrs. Rouhani.
Thank you, Faridaz.
It's great to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be with you. I want to thank the members of the organizing committee who do so much every week to bring this program to us. And it's been my pleasure to be involved for the 3 sessions on the most consequential women in Abdu'l-Baha's life: his mother, his sister, and his wife. Today, the presentation is about Munira Khanum. And I will start by sharing the PowerPoint presentation, which dear Payman has undertaken to help me. And I will have it up soon.
Payman?
Okay, this is the title of the 3 sessions. And today is about Monireh Khanum, Abdu'l-Baha's wife. Next, please. All right, this is Monireh Khanum, the woman who married Abdu'l-Baha. She's a remarkable woman in the history of our faith. She's nowhere close in rank to Asiya Khanum and Baharieh Rouhani, but a very outstanding woman in her own right. As you will see, she was well educated. She was a writer, a poet, and I will start by introducing her lineage. Next, please. The father of Monireh Khanum was Mir Sayyid Muhammad Ali. Let me see, sorry, sometimes I get confused with the names. Her father was Mirza Muhammad Ali Nahri. He was the son of Haji Sayyid Mehdi Nahri, who was the son of Sayyid Muhammad Hindi. If you wonder why he's known as Hindi, it's because as a young man, he left his hometown in Zaware, Isfahan, a suburb of Isfahan, and went to India. There she married an aristocrat woman who was very wealthy. And as a result of that marriage, he gained a lot of wealth. One of his sons, Sayyid Mehdi, who is the grandfather of Monireh Khanum, migrated to Iraq and built a river bank in the twin holy cities of Karbala and Najaf and became known as Nahri. Nahri means river. It's in Farsi, a river is called Nahr. Sayyid Mehdi had several children. One of them was Mirza Muhammad Ali Nahri, who is Monireh Khanum's father. Fortunately, we have the name of her mother as well. It's Zahra Begum. As you can see, there isn't much about her lineage from her mother's side because it was not customary for historians to focus on the lineage of women. Next. Monireh Khanum's birth is one of those unusual accounts that we rarely have heard of. Mirza Muhammad Ali and his wife Zahra Begum were childless. When the Bab was in Isfahan in 1846, Mirza Ibrahim Nahri, the brother of Mirza Muhammad Ali, hosted a banquet in honor of the Bab. During dinner, Mirza Ibrahim informed the Bab that his brother, Mirza Muhammad Ali, was childless and begged him to intercede in his behalf and to grant his heart's desire. The account has been recorded by Nabil in Nabil's narrative, The Dawnbreakers. He says the Bab took a portion of the food with which he had been served, placed it with his own hands on a platter, and handed it to his host, asking him to take to Mirza Muhammad Ali and his wife. He said, "Let them both partake of this, their wish will be fulfilled. By virtue of that portion which the Bab had chosen to bestow upon her, the wife of Mirza Muhammad Ali conceived and in due time gave birth to a girl. Next. All right. That girl was called Fatima at birth. When she came of age, she became engaged to her cousin. They were very much in love. They exchanged letters. And when the wedding night arrived, according to Persian custom, she says, Munir Khanum has written her own autobiography. And what I'm going to read to you is from her own autobiography. She says, all our friends and acquaintances accompanied us to the house of the bridegroom's uncle. My cousin welcomed me formally, and we were taken to the house built for us. I saw that the young man was not speaking at all. He did not try to remove the veil from my face. He did not say, are you a guest or my cousin or an acquaintance? Where were you? Then she says, I tolerated this for some hours and did not utter a single word. Then said, what is wrong with you that you say nothing? He replied, I have such a headache that I cannot speak. And again, he fell silent. His brothers and all the relatives became sad and depressed. They would not speak to him. And that poor soul was bewildered and dejected also. He swore, I am not responsible for this. I cannot approach her. I will submit to anything except intimacy with my cousin. There is surely a wisdom in this that will become apparent. Next. Life continued like this, with him remaining silent and confused. He spoke to no one and befriended none. Then one night, we were alone in the house, except for a maid servant. She saw his head bowed down onto his lap, and after a while, she approached him and saw that he had yielded up his life. After this incident, I forsook the world and its people. I cut myself off from all earthly attachments. With a heart full of the love of God alone, I occupied myself in reading verses and scripture and associating with the believers. A very sad story for a young woman full of hope. It was surely devastating, but she resolved, as you see, that the best she could do was to occupy herself with reading verses and scripture and associating with the friends. Next. After the death of the man with whom Fatima Khanum was to spend her life, you will see I use Fatima Khanum, which is the same as Munir Khanum. But we will use Munir Khanum when Baha'u'llah gives her that name. Before then, I will be using Fatima Khanum consistently. So she says, after the death of the man with whom Fatima Khanum was to spend her life, these are not actually her words, it's just the story in my own words. There was a woman named Khurshid Begum that is well known in the history of our faith. Abdu'l-Baha has written about her, has given a talk about her under Shams Doha, and it's in the Memorials of the Faithful. This woman, from the very beginning, she was very erudite and insightful. And when she saw what happened to Fatima Khanum, she maintained and predicted that a fate far more glorious awaited Fatima Khanum. This lady was married to Fatima Khanum's uncle, so was an aunt by marriage. Khurshid Begum later had a conversation with a returning pilgrim named Sayyid Mehdi Daheji. Khurshid Begum asked him, while you were in the holy presence of Baha'u'llah, did you ever hear him speak of any girl he may have selected to marry the master? See, she had in her mind a clear vision that Fatima Khanum may have been selected to marry Abdu'l-Baha. And she was trying to find an evidence to show Fatima Khanum that she had such a glorious destiny. And of course, Fatima Khanum would not give in to that kind of prediction. Now, what Sayyid Mehdi said gave Khurshid Begum what she needed. Sayyid Mehdi said, I heard nothing about that. That's about the girl that had been selected to marry Abdu'l-Baha. However, he said, one day when the Blessed Beauty was in the outer rooms of the house, as he paced about, he said, Agha Sayyid Mehdi, last night I had a strange dream. I dreamt that the face of the beautiful girl in Tehran, whose hand in marriage we have asked from our brother Mirza Hassan for the most great branch, gradually became darkened and indistinct. At the same time, another girl appeared with a luminous face and a luminous heart. I have chosen her for the most great branch. That is all I have heard. About this girl whose face darkened is the young woman that was in a way betrothed to Abdu'l-Baha. We will get to her, to that story later. But for the moment, just remember Baha'u'llah's dream about the girl who, with a luminous face and luminous heart. When Khurshid Begum got home and saw Fatima Khanum, she said, I swear by the one true God, at the very moment when Agha Sayyid Mehdi told this story, I felt that without a shadow of a doubt, you are that girl. You will see. Fatima Khanum sought forgiveness from God for having such a thought and asked Khurshid Begum not to say anything more about that. Next. Now hold on to this part of the story and add this note also to what indicated Fatima Khanum's father's intention. When Fatima Khanum was 11 years old, her father attained Baha'u'llah's presence in Baghdad. Upon returning to Isfahan, he told his wife, "It is my intention to take Fatima to the blessed household." However, he did not live long enough to fulfill his intention. Now, after the lapse of 15 years, that intention was being miraculously fulfilled. Next. So what happened that Fatima Khanum left Isfahan for the Holy Land? Baha'u'llah entrusted Sheikh Salman, a trusted servant, with responsibility to arrange the transfer of Munira Khanum, should be Fatima Khanum, the same as Munira Khanum, and her brother Sayyid Yahya to the Holy Land. Upon reaching Isfahan, he informed the King of Martyrs, Fatima Khanum's cousin, of the nature of the mission. He said, "I carry glad tidings and untold bounties. Your cousin, the daughter of the late Mirza Muhammad Ali, is to accompany me to Mecca with the Muslim pilgrims going there, as though we too are making a pilgrimage to the Kaaba. You must make preparations for this journey until the usual time of Hajj, when we can set out and travel by the way of Shiraz and Bushehr. However, do not give out this news until 2 or 3 days before our departure." The reason Sheikh Salman wanted everything to be done without broadcasting the news was the safety of Fatima Khanum was at stake. Baha'u'llah's enemies and opponents in Iran were waiting for any opportunity to frustrate any plans that Baha'u'llah had. And we will see what happened to the girl that was to marry Abdu'l-Baha, and it ended in disappointment. Fatima Khanum was a cousin of the King of Martyrs and the beloved of martyrs. The young man that Fatima Khanum was to marry in the first place was the younger brother of the King of Martyrs and the beloved of martyrs. Next. Because they had to go via Shiraz and Bushehr to Arabian Peninsula and to Mecca for the pilgrimage, they had the opportunity to stay in Shiraz for a few days. And during those days, Fatima Khanum met Khadija Begum, the wife of the Bab in Shiraz. Actually, she stayed with the Afghans during her stay in that city. She makes mention in her autobiography of being with Khadija Begum, of asking her questions about the Bab. It was during that visit that Khadija Begum asked Fatima Khanum to present to Baha'u'llah 3 requests on her behalf. One of them was for Khadija Begum to attain Baha'u'llah's presence. Baha'u'llah accepted all 3 requests. Unfortunately, one of them was to meet Baha'u'llah and be in his presence, did not materialize. Next. The steamer carrying Fatemeh Khanum, her brother, and Sheikh Salman reached the shores of Akka half an hour before sunset. When they disembarked after dark and reached the landing, they were greeted warmly by Aghay Kalim, which is Mirza Musa Kalim, Baha'u'llah's brother, faithful brother, and Khaja Aboud, the owner of the house in which Baha'u'llah lived. And they were taken to Khane Omdan, also known as Khane Abamid. The morning after their arrival, the women members of Baha'u'llah's family visited Fatemeh Khanum in the house of Aghay Kalim and his wife, and together they attained the presence of Baha'u'llah. Next. These were Baha'u'llah's first words addressed to Fatemeh Khanum. He said, "We have received you into this prison at a time when the prison door is closed to all the believers, so that the power of God may become clear and evident to all." Soon before Fatemeh Khanum's arrival in Akka, there had been some developments, and as a result of those developments, government had reintroduced stringent conditions, very restrictive on Baha'u'llah and his family. And that's what Baha'u'llah is referring to here, that while the door of the prison was closed, he arranged for Fatemeh Khanum to arrive safely. Next. Fatemeh Khanum remained in Akka in the house of Mirza Musa and his family for 5 months. During the 5 months wait before marriage, Fatemeh Khanum had the honor of attaining Baha'u'llah's presence several times. She also received through Aghay Kalim messages showing Baha'u'llah's infinite bounties and sometimes a gift. One day, Aghay Kalim returned from his visit to Baha'u'llah and addressing Fatemeh Khanum said, "I have brought you a wonderful gift. You have been renamed Monireh," that's luminous, by him. Upon hearing this, she immediately remembered Baha'u'llah's dream that Sayyid Mehdi Daheji had related to Shams Doha, Khurshid Begum in Isfahan, sometime earlier. Next. Let's go back now and see what Abdu'l-Baha experienced in his life before marrying Monireh Khanum. As extraordinary as it may appear, Abdu'l-Baha too was to marry his paternal cousin. Her name was Shahrbanu Khanum, and her father was Mirza Muhammad Hassan, Baha'u'llah's half-brother. That marriage did not materialize, despite efforts that were made concerning that episode. Abdu'l-Baha says, "We were in Adrianople when the great aunt who favored Yahya did her utmost to please him. She sent that poor soul, that is Shahrbanu Khanum, to the home of the son of the prime minister, Mirza Ali Khan. Mirza Ali Khan was the name of the young man that Shahrbanu Khanum married. It had been reported," Abdu'l-Baha says, "that she went with fearful, something is missing here, with fearful heart and trembling. or with tearful eyes and trembling. Within a short span of time, she contracted tuberculosis and died of consumption. God's mercy be upon her. The great aunt that Abdu'l-Baha talks about is Baha'u'llah's eldest half-sister, who for some reason tried all her life to undermine Baha'u'llah and discredit him. And one of the awful things that she did was preventing the marriage of Baharieh Rouhani with Abdu'l-Baha. Next. Baha'u'llah refers to this episode in Episode to the Son of the Wolf, one of his works a year before his ascension. He wrote that episode to the Son of the Wolf. He says, our late brother, Mirza Muhammad Hassan's daughter, upon him be the glory of God and his peace and his mercy, who had been betrothed to the most great branch, Abdu'l-Baha, was taken by the sister of this wronged one from Nur to her own place. Nur is the district of Nur where Baharieh Rouhani lived. He says, how strange that our sister should have taken her to her own house and then arranged for her to be sent elsewhere. None of our loved ones, whether in these regions or in that country, could believe our sister capable of an act so contrary to decency, affection, and friendship. It must be evident, therefore, how intense was the grief which this act inflicted upon this wronged one. Later on, she threw in her lot with Mirza Yahya, that is the sister of Baha'u'llah. Next. About the fate of Baharieh Rouhani, we know from recordings in some recollections from, I think, her little brother, that immediately after the marriage took place, Baharieh Rouhani realized the gravity of the mistake she had made in marrying Ali Khan. She found herself trapped with no glimmer of hope for deliverance. She felt ashamed and remorseful. She had bartered the paradise of being in the land of her beloved with the hell of living with a man she did not love. She prayed God to hasten her end, relieve her from suffering and the guilt she felt in her heart. She died of tuberculosis a few months later. Next. So you see, Abdu'l-Baha went through this experience, which was very painful to him and Baha'u'llah and the whole family. Bahareh Rouhani went also through that very painful, disappointing experience, because it seems something was preordained by virtue of the portion that the Bab had asked Bahareh Rouhani's father and mother to partake of, to become united. And everything happened to make possible for the marriage of Abdu'l-Baha and Bahareh Rouhani, which happened on 8 March 1873. On the night of the wedding, Bahareh Rouhani wore a white dress which had been given to her by the most exalted live. That's Abdu'l-Baha's mother. At about 3 hours after sunset, Baha'u'llah summoned her. She attained his presence in the company of Hazrat Khanum, that is the greatest holy leaf. Seated under a mosquito net, Baha'u'llah addressed Munir Khanum. You have come, you are welcome. O my leaf and my handmaiden, verily, we chose thee and accept thee to serve my most great branch. And this is by my grace, which is not equaled by all, the treasure of earth and heaven. How many were the girls in Baghdad and Adrianople, and in this most great prison, who hoped to attain to this bounty, and whose hopes were not fulfilled. You must be thankful for this most great bestowal and great favor. Next. After Munir Khanum left Baha'u'llah's presence, she went to the room where she saw the most great branch. She says, in utmost grace, bounty, and majesty. Speaking of feelings of joy and rapture, surging within her heart, she says, how blessed and exalted was that time, how joyous that hour in that room. Abdu'l-Baha's mother, the wife of Aghay Kalim, the wife of Khaja Abud, and her daughters, as well as other female members of Baha'u'llah's family, joined the couple in their room and recited tablets revealed for celebrating holy days and festive occasions. The bridal chamber was the room connecting the eastern part of the house of Abud to the western part of that house. Those who have been on pilgrimage, I'm sure they remember very well having visited the room in which Abdu'l-Baha and Munir Khanum's marriage took place. The reason that it took 5 months was lack of space in that place, because Baha'u'llah at that time and his family occupied only half of what is known today as House Abud. And there were so many in the family who lived just in a few rooms. When Khaja Abud, the owner, realized lack of space was the reason for the delay in marriage, he made that room available, which connects the northern part of the house to the southern part. Next. Let's see briefly what happened during the time between Munir Khanum married Abdu'l-Baha to the ascension of Baha'u'llah. Munir Khanum knew well the incomparable blessings she enjoyed as Abdu'l-Baha's wife, and of living so close to Baha'u'llah, the source of bounty. However, life was not without severe tests and trials. What caused her immense grief was the death of 4 or 5 of her children. The following tablet was revealed after the death of one of the daughters. Addressing Munir Khanum, Baha'u'llah says, O Munir, he verily fulfilled what hath been promised in the book. Let nothing sadden thee. She verily ascended to God and returned to him, just as she had appeared from him. She hath returned, rested, rejoiced, and is overjoyed. Verily, thy Lord is the all-knowing, the all-informed. Next. Baharieh Rouhani was affected by the death of Hussein, was most affected by the death of Hussein Effendi, the only surviving son. She had about 8 pregnancies. One of them was twins. And out of the all pregnancies that she had, 4 girls survived. One of the boys who survived was a very sweet, wonderful, smart son that she was very attached to. And when he died, she was beside herself with her grief. Baha'u'llah, to console her, revealed this tablet. No refuge is there for the servants from God's absolute decree and his precise command. When at the bidding of the Eternal One, the irresistible decree strikes, it's incumbent upon all to submit to it and to be content. Although outwardly separation consumeth the heart, yet it is the cause of reunion and return. And for some children, it is a means of protection. To none are known the exigencies of divine wisdom. The effect of this ascension is in the grasp of God's knowledge, and to divulge it is not permissible. Should we remove the veil from this station, the immense sorrow will be transmuted to great joy, and innumerable souls would take their flight. But this son was and continues to be the adornment of the highest heaven. At this very moment, through God's bounty and divine mercy, we behold our Tabasha engaged in tamasha in the highest paradise. The reason Baha'u'llah is using these 2 words, Tabasha and tamasha, is because Hussein Effendi, whenever he was asked where he was going, he said, I'm going for sightseeing. Tamasha in Farsi means sightseeing. But he could not pronounce the word properly. He said Tabasha instead of tamasha. And Baha'u'llah uses this to bring back to memory the sweetness of this child who was taken away. He continues by saying, he, that's God, is the most patient. He hath commanded them that are nigh unto him to observe true patience. We beseech God to protect you and to draw you near to him at all times. He verily is the all-possessing, the most exalted. What a great example, and what a consolation to the hearts of those parents who grieve the loss of a child, that in the family of the manifestation of God, he went through similar experiences. You know, Baha'u'llah lost his son, the purest branch that he offered as a sacrifice for the deliverance of the believers and the unification of the world and the quickening of the people. And now Abdu'l-Baha's son is taken away. I find it very comforting that we have these writings to depend on and to remind ourselves of the great wisdom that is in every act of the God, and that we have to be patient. Next. Baha'u'llah's ascension and its aftermath. The tale of Baharieh Rouhani's sufferings caused by mischief makers those envious of Abdu'l-Baha as the center of Baha'u'llah's covenant is too long to be condensed in a slide. That's what I put here, because the events that followed Baha'u'llah's ascension and the way that Abdu'l-Baha suffered in the hands of those who were envious of his position is well documented in the history of our faith. What we are concerned with here is how Baharieh Khanum was the target because people could not very openly oppose Abdu'l-Baha, and they did everything to discredit him, that they used Baharieh Khanum as the target for their meaning, for their meanness and the way that they said things to hurt her and through her to hurt Abdu'l-Baha. As a result of what they did, Abdu'l-Baha actually left Akka and went to Tiberias, which is in the next slide. The mischief makers' misdeeds became blatant and severe with every passing day, causing dismay and confusion among the less deepened friends. To provide them with space to see with their own eyes what his adversary was determined to do, Abdu'l-Baha withdrew to Tiberias. Abdu'l-Baha here is doing the same thing that Baha'u'llah did in Baghdad when his half-brothers' activities against him reached its peak. He left Baghdad for the mountains of Kurdistan because he wanted the sincere believers to see what his half-brother and his supporters were doing to him, and it served that purpose. Abdu'l-Baha did a similar thing, only he didn't go that far away. He went to Tiberias, which today is about an hour's drive from Akka to Tiberias. But in those days, traveling by a mule, it took probably half a day. When Baharieh Khanum wrote to him and complained about what the breakers of the covenant were doing to her, he responded, "O thou sorrowful leaf," he says, "be not sad and grieve not. That is the way the world hath been since its beginning. This is God's way. No change and variation wilt thou ever find in God's way. Let not the whisperings of people cause thee grief, and be not saddened by some events. I am the target of these sayings and rumors. It hath been and will become manifest. Engage day and night in remembering the blessed beauty and forget all else. I have come here and left the field empty, that those who are weak in their faith may do as they please, that they may do it openly, not in secret, and soon will the unjust assailants know what vicissitudes their affairs will take." Next. It was during the time Abdu'l-Baha was in Tiberias that the marriage of his eldest daughter, Baharieh Rouhani, and Aqa Mirza Hadi, a nephew of Khadija Begum, took place. And regarding this marriage, the bridegroom and his mother had been to the Holy Land earlier to express the intention and get permission for Aqa Mirza Hadi to marry Baharieh Rouhani. Baha'u'llah also had approved of the marriage. But when Baha'u'llah's ascension took place, they realized it wasn't a good time for a marriage so soon after his ascension. So they returned to Iran. After 2 years, they came back with the same intention. And it coincided with the time that Abdu'l-Baha had withdrawn to Tiberias. And it was during his absence that this marriage took place. Next. Now, after Ziya Khanum and Agha Mirza Hadi got married, a year later, Shoghi Effendi was born. Before he was born, the house of Abud in which Abdu'l-Baha and his family lived did not accommodate the larger number of his family. So he moved his family to the house of Abdullah Pasha. Shoghi Effendi's birth was in March of 1897. But soon after that event, soon after Shoghi Effendi's birth, the first group of Western pilgrims arrived. And that was another happy occasion for the Holy Family. The Western pilgrims were accommodated in the house of Abdullah Pasha. Akka didn't really have the kind of facilities and that Haifa had to a degree for Western believers to stay in. So Abdu'l-Baha wanted to be sure that when they arrived, they could be accommodated in a place that made them as comfortable as possible. So their arrival in 1898 was a long anticipated and happy event in Abdu'l-Baha's ministry. Among them were Lua Getzinger and Laura Clifford Barney, who spent a considerable time with Abdu'l-Baha's family. They were actually, all the Western pilgrims were Abdu'l-Baha's guests when they were in Akka. So the close association with, of these Western pilgrims and their intimacy generated spontaneous response from the close association of Abdu'l-Baha's family with the Western pilgrims created a response. And the fact that they called Munir Khanum the Holy Mother shows the kind of intimacy that they felt between themselves and Abdu'l-Baha's family, especially Munir Khanum, who was married, had children, and for them, it was the equivalent of a Holy Mother. For Iranians and the Eastern believers, this term was not used because it wasn't in our terminology. Next. Then time came when restrictions on Abdu'l-Baha lessened, and finally he was free to move. One of the things that he had started, one of the significant projects that he had started earlier on was to build the original 6 rooms of the Shrine of the Bab, because the remains of the Bab had been transferred from Iran to the Holy Land according to Baha'u'llah's wish. And Baha'u'llah had also indicated where they were to be laid. And Baha'u'llah's, one of Abdu'l-Baha's major tasks was to build those rooms, which later on was expanded to 9, and then the superstructure, which is known as the Shrine of the Bab today. So as he was supervising and continuing that project, his enemies again brought certain claims to the government that Abdu'l-Baha was building a fortress on Mount Carmel because he wanted to rise against the government. And that increased the restrictions on Abdu'l-Baha and his family. But eventually, after the Young Turks Revolution, Abdu'l-Baha was exonerated and had freedom to move. And almost simultaneously with the building of the shrines, he also started building a house lower down below the shrine for the family to move to. And it happened just before he left for his travels to the Western countries. Next. Monireh Khanum, during Abdu'l-Baha's extensive travels, Abdu'l-Baha had been away for short periods of time during his visits to Beirut and withdrawal to Tiberias, but had never been so far away from his family for such a long time. It took 3 years. He spent quite a part of it in Egypt, but then most of it in Europe and in North America. During his absence, he communicated regularly with Monireh Khanum, also with the Greatest Holy Leaf. He advised Monireh Khanum on how to respond to inquiries about his whereabouts, also responding to matters raised in correspondence. As his schedule became tighter and tighter, and time for return drew closer, the communications were less frequent. Monireh Khanum was always concerned about Abdu'l-Baha's health, needed assurance that he was well. His safe return to the Holy Land in 1913 was the greatest gift she received. Next. Well, soon after Abdu'l-Baha's return to the Holy Land in 1913, the First World War broke out, and it caused a lot of hardship. And Abdu'l-Baha sent his family to one of the outlying places, not very far from Akka. Send them to Abu Sinan because there was bombing and the big cities were in danger. Abdu'l-Baha himself remained in Akka, Haifa area to attend to the matters at hand. Next. Abdu'l-Baha's ascension took place on 28 November 1921. The details are recorded in history. The customs of the time prevented the female members of his family to have an active, visible role in the procession and other public events in connection with his passing. However, there is no doubt that they were well placed to see and hear what was going on, even though they could not be seen and heard. I just put enough here information for you to visualize. As you see the photographs and things in connection with Abdu'l-Baha's ascension, you may wonder, where are the female members of his family? It's because it was not customary for women to participate in such events. I mean, women from the East, from Iran and the Middle East, you see some Western women and children, but not the members of the Holy Family, the female members of the Holy Family. Next. The passing of the Greatest Holy Leaf. The Greatest Holy Leaf and Monireh Khanum were about the same age and lived as two loving sisters and intimate friends for 60 years. They lived in the same house for 60 years. After Abdu'l-Baha's ascension, Monireh Khanum stood firmly behind the Greatest Holy Leaf, extending full support to her in the execution of the plans for Abdu'l-Baha's funeral and interment. She also followed her example in bowing before the authority of Shoghi Effendi, her own grandson, whom Abdu'l-Baha had appointed the guardian of the faith and authorized interpreter of the writings. During Shoghi Effendi's absence from the Holy Land, Monireh Khanum was fully supportive of the Greatest Holy Leaf, whom he had appointed as head of a committee to administer the affairs of the Baha'i world. When the Greatest Holy Leaf passed away in July 1932, Monireh Khanum lost her closest companion and intimate friend. In a letter of lament penned a year after the passing of the Greatest Holy Leaf, she gives vent to her feelings of sorrow and grief. Next. She says, I sit to write a fitting letter, a letter of swelling sorrow, soiled with my heart's blood, patterned with my tears, black as Layli's tresses, laid waste like Majnun's soul, lacerated like a lover's heart, grieved from first to last. Next. The passing of Monireh Khanum. She was 91 years old when she passed away on April 30th, 1938. On that day, the National Convention of the Baha'is of the United States was in session. Shoghi Effendi conveyed the news of her passing in a cablegram he sent to the United States. Holy Mother, Monireh Khanum, ascended Abha Kingdom, stop. With sorrowful hearts, Baha'is world over recall diverse phases, her rich, eventful life, marked by unique services, which by virtue of her exalted position, she rendered during darkest days of Abdu'l-Baha's life. Stop. All Rizwan festivities suspended. Stop. Advise convention delegates, devote special session, her memory, hold befitting gathering, auditorium, Mashraq al-Askar. Next. Monireh Khanum's resting place. Shoghi Effendi makes mention of Monireh Khanum's resting place in conjunction with the transfer of the remains of the purest branch and Asiya Khanum from Akka to Mount Carmel in December 1939. Those who attended last week's session remember the slides of the Ark on Mount Carmel and the position of the resting places of the Greatest Holy Leaf and her mother and her brother, the purest branch, and also the resting place of Monireh Khanum at a lower level on Mount Carmel, just below the level of Baharieh Khanum's resting place. It's very indicative of the station of the Greatest Holy Leaf and these other members of the family, especially Monireh Khanum, which was much lower in rank to Baharieh Khanum and Asiya Khanum and the purest branch. Those who want to see can check the YouTube of that session and see the significance of the location that Shoghi Effendi chose for these resting places of the members of Abdu'l-Baha's family. And in this cablegram also, he refers to it. He says, blessed remains purest branch and master's mother, transferred, hallowed precincts, shrines, Mount Carmel. Cherished wish, greatest holy leaf fulfilled. Sister, mother, wife, Abdu'l-Baha, reunited. One spot designed constitute focal center, Baha'i administrative institutions at Faith's World Center. Share joyful news, entire body American believers. You are familiar with the way cablegrams were written, and almost no prepositions were used, and extra letters and words that were not necessary to be in the text, you will see, are not here. You can add those in order to read today for those who are not familiar with that style. Anyway, this may be the last slide. Dear Payman, I don't know, is it? Yes. Thank you very much for your patience and your attention.
Thank you, dearest Baharieh Rouhani Ewing, for introducing us to Munir Khanum, the wife of Abdu'l-Baha, and for telling us her story, the circumstances that led her into the life of Abdu'l-Baha, and of course, changed her life forever. We would love to thank you for sharing with us the insightful research that you've conducted into her life, as well as into the lives of both the mother and sister of Abdu'l-Baha. For the 2.5 decades you undertook to research the lives of women associated with both Baha'u'llah and the Bab. These are not only significant for the Baha'i faith, but also for future women to know and understand these women who lived in a time and a society where it was not customary, as you said, for women to be seen or heard. Thank you for shedding light on these women whose lives, whose actions, whose stations and significance, as shown by Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, and Shoghi Effendi, have found no parallel in human history. I wanted to take a moment to alert those gathered that we would like to have the Q&A portion after the devotions. So we'll begin the devotions, after which we'll stop the recording, and then you can participate in asking, commenting to your heart's content. Thank you all again for attending. Today's program will be available on the Nova Baha'i Center website, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, where I'm just going to look up what the topic is for next week. We will receive a talk, which is a video reflection on Abdu'l-Baha through the eyes of Laura Dreyfus Barney. Our presenter will be Ms. Mona Khademi. Thank you again for joining us. We will now close with devotions.
Thank you very much, John. Dear friends, don't leave, because we have a wonderful Q&A sessions. So let me play the devotional and we will continue with the Q&A. Thank you, dear friends.
Oh, friend, oh, friend, in the garden of thy heart, plant not but the rose of love, a plant not bud, the rose of love, the rose of love. And from the nightingale of affection and desire, loosen not thy hold, loosen not thy hold, loosen not thy hold. A treasure, the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly. Oh, friend, in the garden of thy heart, plant not but the rose of love, plant not but the rose of love, plant not but the rose of love. Treasure the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly.
Thank you. Dear friends, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment at this time, please raise your hand in the participant window, or you can type